Welcome back to the 6Ps podcast. We're just going to continue on today from our discussion last week about essay topics and that conversation we had with the VCAA examiner when they went through in a little bit of detail what takes place in terms of writing topics and also addressing them. So, brief overview. There are a range of essay topics that you may be asked with the comparative. We've managed to break them down a little bit and segment them. Now, the task is always the same no matter what type of question you get. You need to write a detailed response that explores all aspects of the topic or addresses all concerns of the topic. And look to structure this through relevant ideas and the different meanings and perspectives of both of the texts that you are exploring. As always with our essay writing, we always start by underlining those key words and then work out what the topic is asking you to do. I mentioned before you have to cover all aspects of the topic, and that is really true. The word all actually is really good to remember. A couple of years we've had topics such as all characters make sacrifices. That's really important because do all characters or do not all characters, it might make a massive difference in terms of your ability to respond to the whole topic. So make sure you know what the topic is asking you to do. Similarly, look at the wording. Are they just asking you to compare, or do they have phrases like to what extent? Because if they do, you'll need to address that in your introduction. Is it to a significant extent, or to a minor extent, to some extent, or to no extent at all, or to a limited extent? These are all really important questions you must address in that introduction. Use your dictionary and rewrite the topic in your own words. Of course, this is if you have the time. I'm mindful of the fact that you only have 60 minutes in the sack, but of course in your practice essays you might give yourself a little bit more time early doors, because as I've said a couple of times now, these essays are really difficult to write because you've got two massive texts to sort of take information from. So it is a massive process. So early doors, I would say, look to rewrite the topic, look for synonyms, take your time with this, and then as you grow in confidence you might look to time yourself. It's important to frame a contention or thesis statement. We know VCAA, as we heard last week, are very big on this idea of a thesis statement. So one that is quite broad, that covers your whole essay, but allows you then to go into more depth and detail in terms of analysis and discussion in your main body paragraphs. And of course, you want to formulate arguments, reasons, ideas. I say ideas which support this. Again, we know VCAA are massive on this word, ideas, and these should formulate or be part of your topic sentences in terms of what supports this thesis statement. So the types of topics, and this was sort of broken down last week to us, but we've got topics that cover one theme, some that cover two themes, some which focus on the setting and context, some which provide us with quotations and a theme, others with the quotation without a theme, where simply it's just the quotations there and it's up to you as a student to analyse it. We've got statements, we've got character-based topics, and of course, the last one, we've only seen sort of one of these, which is genre and text features topics. But again, the genre and text features should be coming up in your analysis anyway. But the two most common ones have been the topics which cover one theme and those which have a quotation and one theme attached to it. I should say as well, with that, that sometimes you will get quotations from only one text plus a theme, but of course we still need to make sure we are analysing and using evidence from both texts. So, one theme. Here's some examples from VCAA exams. Compare how the two texts explore the importance of belonging, and compare the impact of racial discrimination in Black Diggers and The Longest Memory. Compare the role of judgment in the two texts. As you can see, these are relatively broad topics, and most of the time students will jump at these because they go, oh, there's a theme, I'm just going to talk about the theme. Again, you want to be really considered in the way that you structure these essays. You want full exploration of not just the themes, but the ideas that stem for that, the issues, the perspectives, and the meanings and messages that are being conveyed by the author. So really consider how you're going to structure this to ensure you're ticking all those boxes. Now, with the examples we look at today, we'll go through ones from Black Diggers and The Longest Memory, or 7 Stages of Grieving, and we'll go through some from The Crucible and Year of Wonders and The Crucible and Dressmaker, because they're obviously the texts that we do at school. So looking at topics with one theme, use that theme as an anchor to formulate ideas and think about those synonyms and varying your sentence structures. That's going to be really important to ensure that your writing is really engaging. Really consider that next level analysis in your planning as well. Where are you going to pop in the context information, the language, the stylistic and structural features, the symbols, and so forth? That's going to be really important because this is the stuff you need to address if you want to get into that upper range. Again, this was addressed by the assessor last week. So, a really good place to start when you think about these is to form an idea bank. So looking at each theme and working out the different ideas and the different messages that are being conveyed about each theme in the two texts. And working out examples. Perhaps you'll be looking at characters, the protagonist, maybe some minor or secondary characters, or you might be also looking at symbols in each text. Once again, we are thinking about the similarities and the differences. So if you've got the topic about, say, for the crucible and the dressmaker, compare the role of judgment in the two texts, you might think of these ideas and think about judgment within insular and conservative communities, the idea of self-judgment and persecution, this notion of institutionalized judgment and the connection between that and punishment or that and authority. You've also got this idea about judgment and forgiveness that comes up throughout the text too. So again, these are just sort of ideas, and you might look to expand on these in a little bit more detail in your main body paragraphs, but these might be what anchor those topic sentences and allows you to analyze both the texts in detail. So let's now look at essay topics which feature quotations. So the first one is when we were pairing this with Black Diggers. You should enjoy every moment of your childhood, plenty of time for the truth later. And from the longest memory, I literally saw the boy surrender to that whip. Compare how the two texts portray innocence. So here we have two quotations and one theme. The second one, the magistrate sits in your heart that judges you from the crucible, and it is a black thing await, it makes itself invisible, then creeps back when I feel safest from the dressmaker. Compare how the crucible and the dressmaker examine the role of judgment and forgiveness. So here we have, firstly, you've got two themes for the second one, and this idea or this theme of innocence in the first one. Notice too about the word how in both these topics. That is so important because what you need to focus on here is how in Black Diggers and The Longest Memory, for example, how the authors or how the playwright portrays innocence. So don't just think I'm going to talk about innocence in my 3 paragraphs. You're going to have to consider how this is portrayed. Same too with the role of judgment and forgiveness. How is it examined? How is it looked upon by Rosalie Ham and Arthur Miller? I think particularly for Arthur Miller, you've got those dual contexts, and this is something you're going to want to really focus on when it comes to the crucible, because this is what may allow your essay to stand out if you can really articulate the dual contexts of the crucible. All right, statements. So statement topics were pretty popular early doors when it came to the comparative essay topics on the exams. Let's have a look at these two. Society is capable of changing. Compare how the two texts explore this idea. Ordinary people sometimes make extraordinary sacrifices for others. Compare how this idea is demonstrated in these texts. So we have 2 idea statements here, and the tip for me is to try and find firstly the key words, but predominantly try and find out what sort of themes you want to be basing it on. So for the first one, this is obviously to do with the Longest Memory and Black Diggers. We're looking at change, particularly social change here, and the idea that society is capable of changing. and looking at whether that is entirely possible. Again, we're not looking at individuals, we're looking at society. So we need to look really broadly at this idea. With the second one, ordinary people sometimes make extraordinary sacrifices for others. Well, sacrifice is the clear theme here, but you should also consider ordinary people and what defines ordinary people. Again, you can consider the different sacrifices characters make and the fact that they make it for others. And this is something to consider as well. A lot of students, as the examiner said last week, were just talking about sacrifices for themselves and not thinking about the for others part. That really needs to be addressed in this essay topic. So with these statement topics, they're not as explicit, so please look out for keywords within the entire idea. Again, once you work out what the keywords are, or you can link them to a key theme, then work out exactly what the essay topic is asking you to do. Really think about the messages the author conveys about this particular idea. And from there, you can start thinking about the characters that the author utilizes in order to examine that. Work backwards if you're struggling as well. So think of characters as a way in. We of course don't want to base our paragraphs or our main body paragraphs on characters, but they are a way in if you're really stuck. Try and group some characters together and work out an overarching idea that you can then link them together with. So just having a look at this sample, the essay topic was judgment from others influences our understanding of ourselves. Compare how the two texts explore this idea. This is for the dressmaker and the crucible. So these are some sample topic sentences, and I want you to consider firstly whether they respond to the topic and also their clarity. Both texts explore judgment's influence over self-understanding through the social codes and conventions of the respective communities. The hysterical ramifications of the prevalent and adverse gender roles within the two texts quintessentially reveals the communal attitudes on self-perception. The last one. The superstitious accusations founded upon the widespread hysteria within both Salem and Dungatar highlights the relationship between self-observation and judgment from a community. I want you to really consider fluency here. I know we spoke about synonyms before, but you definitely don't want to overdo it because your ideas aren't going to be clearly expressed. You really want to make sure you're formulating clear ideas that respond to the overall idea here, which is about judgment from others and how it influences an individual's understanding of themselves. Again, if you're stuck, work back from characters. When we think about judgment, of course, we're going to think about Tilly and John Proctor. But who else might you consider? Think about the secondary characters. Then think about the settings. These are two settings which are quite toxic and full of judgment of others. On a more holistic sense, you should consider these settings. And then work out what messages the authors want to convey about judgment and whether they, well, I should say as well, and the symbols and the language that they use to convey this. Let's have a look at topics that feature two themes, which again were pretty popular early doors with VCAA, but we haven't seen them too much since. The first one, how does the crucible and the dressmaker explore the role of judgment and acceptance? And the second one, compare how the crucible and the dressmaker explores issues around victimization and blame. That victimization and blame one, of course, came up in 2017 with Year of Wonders. Again, you'll notice the key words. They're how and explore in both of these. And again, we really want to consider the authors when it comes to planning for these essay topics. All right, there are a couple of potential structures you could use here. And again, this stems from our conversation with that VCAA examiner last week who suggested that a lot of students got stuck with this. So for that victimization and blame one, the potential structure could be the first main body paragraph focuses on an idea surrounding victimization, and the second main body paragraph could focus on a second idea about blame, and then formulate an idea in your third main body paragraph that covers both victimization and blame. Again, the assessor was pretty clear in saying that so many students paired both of them together in every single paragraph, and it didn't quite work, and it was quite an ineffective way to go about it. Another way you could do it, of course, to structure your piece could be to look at the similarities in both texts and formulate three different ideas. So the first two ideas might focus on similarities, and the third one might focus on differences. Another way to go about it, of course, is, I guess, the safest option, which is to look at similarities and differences in both texts for all your paragraphs. Again, structure I consider a bit of a safety net. Once you gain confidence with that structure, though, you can then broaden your horizons a little bit more and look to be more creative in the way that you explore your ideas and your analysis of the texts. So So let's have a look at some more sample topic sentences. This time, consider the difference between the last set that we looked at. By elucidating the ways in which outcasts are victimised in times of crises, Brooks and Miller engender a sense of camaraderie within readers, propelling them to sympathise with marginalised individuals. Brooks and Miller also present the way which individuals use scapegoating as a way to victimise others, characterising some as opportunists. However, while characters in The Crucible are inclined to harm others because of the oppression Salem places on them, characters in Year of Wonders do so out of greed and self-interest. Something to note here is how prominent the authors are in the topic sentence, and I think that's really important in showing to the examiner that you are looking at the meanings, the messages that the authors are trying to convey in their texts, and again, really addressing that how part of the essay topic. All right, let's have a look at a sample topic. Compare the way fear and guilt are explored in The Crucible and The Dressmaker. Again, we want to focus on those key themes, which in this case are going to be fear and guilt. We've got a two-theme topic here. So it's going to be really important to firstly consider how we're going to structure it and to look at what ideas we can formulate around fear and around guilt. So when it comes to fear, you might discuss, say, ideas around what motivates people to feel fearful, or who and what people are fearful of, or to a greater extent, what societies fear, and where does that fear come from? Is it ingrained or systemic within societies, or does it come from external forces? So too with guilt. Consider where guilt comes from. Does it come from within an individual, or does it filter through a whole society? And what are the outcomes of guilt? What are the ramifications and the repercussions of guilt within both individuals and within towns? Then consider how the authors explore these ideas. Is it through, say, their structure, for example? We know that flashbacks are quite prominent in The Dressmaker, and you might look to use these in terms of looking at Tilly's guilt. When it comes to fear, perhaps consider, say, Arthur Miller's authorial interjections when he talks about the forest or in the opening part of the text, and this fear of the invisible. Think as well, or make that connection between the fear of the unknown, or the fear of witchcraft, and the fear of communism, which pervaded 1950s American society. That might be a really good way in to look at the messages that Arthur Miller is trying to convey. So let's have a think about some sample topic sentences. Again, these relate to different ideas based on those key themes. Both texts examine fear motivating individuals to act in irrational ways, causing detrimental harm to their communities. Having established the way in which individuals react on the basis of fear, The Crucible and The Dressmaker also criticise the way fear is used to manipulate others. While fear is rendered as completely destructive to the communities, the influence of guilt on the two respective towns differs, as guilt acts as a moral compass in The Crucible. Both texts explore the role of guilt in oppressing minorities and nonconformists in the respective communities. So again, while those key themes are mentioned somewhere within those topic sentences, we have ideas that stem from these. And in your main body paragraphs, you're going to obviously want to explore this in a little bit more depth and detail. So some tips. Firstly, even though it only says compare, they want you to also contrast how the texts explore the ideas and the themes as well. So that's something to really consider. Even though it only says compare, and this is a pretty common trait that happens. It's only the similarities that are looked at. You really want to consider the differences as well. Please make sure you are responding to the topic, RTFQ, ATFQ. Please don't go in with preconceived plans or ideas on what you're going to write on. Parachute theory, it should always be open. Your mind should always be open at all times. Write a brief plan before writing. So this is something you should definitely do in the exam as well. It can just be a brief little plan in terms of what your thesis statement is and what the three ideas you're going to write on are, and maybe some quotes or some characters. For me, when they say your writing time begins now, the first thing I do is write down every single quote I can think of that's relevant to the essay topic. Again, you might find that works for you, but you might remember quotes a little bit better than I can. The last thing I think, which is really important, is to use structure as a safety net. Once you build confidence in being able to write fluently in a comparative essay, again, you can then branch off and look to write using a different structure or more fluent structure potentially that allows for exploration of those key themes and ideas.